San Francisco's notorious fog had rolled in thick that evening, wrapping the city in its cool, damp embrace. Amanda Green, the CEO of a rapidly growing tech startup, was finishing a long day of meetings. As she left her sleek, modern office, the chill in the air nudged her to pull her coat tighter around herself. Her mind was still racing, filled with the details of the day: investment pitches, strategic plans, and a barrage of emails that needed her attention. Amanda's phone buzzed with a new message, but as she reached for it, she noticed something unusual out of the corner of her eye. Across the street, in the dim light of a flickering street lamp, a family huddled together on a bench. A man, a woman, and a small boy, wrapped in blankets too thin for the biting cold. The man's face was lined with fatigue, the woman's eyes darting nervously around, while the boy, no more than 7, clutched a stuffed toy tightly to his chest. Amanda hesitated, her professional instincts urging her to walk on, but something made her stop. Maybe it was the way the boy looked up at his parents with a mix of fear and trust, or perhaps it was the gnawing sense that she couldn't just ignore them. She crossed the street, her footsteps quickening as she approached. "Excuse me," Amanda called out, her voice softened by the night's quiet. The couple looked up, startled but not hostile. "Are you all right? Do you need any help?" The man, Tom Ellis, exchanged a glance with his wife, Sarah, before answering. We're just trying to find somewhere to stay for the night," he said, his voice rough from exhaustion. "But it's been difficult." Amanda's mind raced. She could easily offer them money or call someone, but that felt too impersonal, too detached. Instead, an idea struck her. "I have a space nearby, a co-working office I'm not using at the moment. It's warm, secure. You could stay there for the night, if you'd like." Tom and Sarah exchanged another look, this time filled with a mixture of hope and wariness. "Why would you do that?" Sarah asked, her voice tinged with disbelief. Amanda offered a small, reassuring smile. "I just want to help. No strings attached. It's just a place to rest." The couple seemed to weigh their options before Tom finally nodded. "Thank you. That would mean a lot to us." Amanda led them a few blocks to the co-working space, a modern, minimalistic office that stood in stark contrast to the city's historic architecture. Inside, the space was open and clean, the kind of environment where ideas flourished. Amanda showed them around, pointing out the kitchenette, bathrooms, and a small room with a couch and blankets. As they settled in, Amanda couldn't help but feel a strange connection to this family. There was something about them. Maybe it was the quiet resilience in Tom's eyes or the way Sarah protectively held her son that tugged at her in a way she hadn't expected. "Get some rest," Amanda said, handing them the key to the office. "I'll check in on you in the morning." Tom and Sarah thanked her again, their gratitude palpable. As Amanda left the building, the fog seemed even thicker, as if the city itself was holding its breath. She couldn't shake the feeling that she had just stepped into something far more complex than she realized. But for now, she pushed those thoughts aside, focusing instead on getting home and preparing for another day in the fast-paced world of tech. Yet, as she walked through the mist-shrouded streets of San Francisco, Amanda couldn't help but wonder what she had just involved herself in and how it might change her life. The following morning, the sun fought through the lingering fog, casting a pale, golden light over San Francisco. Amanda Green arrived at her office earlier than usual, driven by the nagging curiosity about the family she had taken in the night before. She had spent most of the night tossing and turning, unable to shake the image of the boys' wide, anxious eyes and the palpable exhaustion on Tom and Sarah's faces. As she approached the building, Amanda noticed something unsettling. A police car and a van from Child Protective Services were parked outside. Her pulse quickened. What had happened? Amanda quickened her pace, her heels clicking sharply on the pavement as she crossed the street. By the time she reached the front door, her mind was racing with possibilities, none of them good. She was barely inside when she was greeted by the sight of 2 uniformed police officers talking to a social worker. The family she had helped was nowhere in sight. "Excuse me," Amanda called out, trying to keep her voice steady. "I'm Amanda Green. This is my office. What's going on here?" The social worker, a woman in her mid-40s with a no-nonsense expression, turned to face Amanda. "Ms. Green, I'm Elaine Rodriguez with Child Protective Services. We received a call this morning about a family possibly in distress staying here. The police are just making sure everything is in order." "In distress?" Amanda echoed, her stomach knotting with unease. "I allowed them to stay here last night because they had nowhere else to go. They seemed all right, just exhausted." The police officer closest to Amanda stepped forward, his face professionally neutral. "We're here to make sure there's no immediate danger to the child or anyone else involved. Could you please step aside while we finish our check?" Amanda nodded, though her mind was spinning. She watched as the officers moved further into the office, their radios crackling with faint static. She felt a wave of dread wash over her. This was not what she had intended when she offered her help the night before. Elaine noticed Amanda's distress and softened her tone slightly. "Miss Green, I understand you were trying to help, but these situations can be more complicated than they appear. Do you know anything more about this family? Any history of issues that might have led them to this point?" Amanda shook her head, frustrated with herself for not asking more questions the night before. "No, I just met them yesterday. They seemed desperate, and I didn't want to leave them out in the cold. I didn't think it would lead to this." Elaine nodded understandingly, though her expression remained serious. "It's admirable that you wanted to help, but we have to make sure the child is safe. Sometimes, these situations involve more than meets the eye." Just as Elaine finished speaking, one of the officers returned, his expression grim. "We found them in the back room. The parents are cooperating, but the boy, he seems scared, and they're not providing much information. We're going to have to take them in for further questioning." Amanda's heart sank. "Take them in? What does that mean for them?" "It means we'll take them to the station, assess the situation, and decide the next steps from there," the officer explained. "It's standard procedure when there's concern about a child's welfare." Amanda felt a surge of helplessness. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. She had wanted to help them, not make things worse. "Can I talk to them before you take them?" she asked, her voice tinged with desperation. The officer hesitated but nodded. "All right, but keep it brief." Amanda was led to the back room where Tom, Sarah, and their son sat together. The atmosphere was heavy with tension. Tom looked up as Amanda entered, his expression a mix of fear and resignation. Sarah was holding their son close, whispering soothing words to him. "I'm so sorry," Amanda said, her voice barely above a whisper as she crouched down to their level. "I didn't know it would turn out like this. I just wanted to help." Tom managed a weak smile. "We know. It's not your fault. We've been running for a while now, from a lot of things. I guess it finally caught up to us." Amanda's eyes flicked to the boy, who was clutching his toy even tighter than before. "What's going to happen to you?" "We don't know," Sarah replied, her voice trembling. "But thank you for giving us a place to stay last night. It meant more to us than you can imagine." Before Amanda could say anything more, the officers stepped in, signaling that it was time to go. Amanda watched as the family was gently escorted out of the building, feeling a profound sense of guilt. Had she done the right thing? Or had she just made things worse for them? As the police car and CPS van drove away, Amanda stood alone in her office, the morning sun now fully illuminating the space. She had wanted to do something good, something meaningful, but now she was left with more questions than answers. One thing was clear. This wasn't the end of it. She couldn't just walk away. Not now. By mid-morning, the chaos of the early hours had begun to fade, but Amanda's anxiety lingered. She sat at her desk, staring at her computer screen, but the words in the emails blurred together, unable to hold her focus. Her thoughts kept drifting back to Tom, Sarah, and their son being driven away. The boy's frightened eyes burned into her memory. She felt a gnawing unease in her gut, a sense that the situation was spiraling out of control. The buzzing of her phone snapped her out of her thoughts. It was a text from Melanie, her company's public relations manager. "We have a problem. Call me ASAP." Amanda's heart skipped a beat as she dialed Melanie's number. "What's going on?" she asked the moment the line connected. "There's a story about you circulating online," Melanie said, her voice taut with concern. "Somehow, the press got wind of what happened this morning. A reporter was at the scene. and they're spinning it into a narrative about you harboring a homeless family in your office. It's gaining traction fast. Amanda felt a cold wave of dread wash over her. Are you serious? How did they even find out? It's unclear, Melanie replied, frustration evident in her tone. But they're framing it as a potential scandal, questioning your judgment and why you got involved in the first place. We need to get ahead of this before it blows up. Amanda slumped back in her chair, trying to process the implications. So, what do we do? We need to issue a statement, clarify your intentions, and control the narrative, Melanie advised. But before that, you need to be prepared. They're digging into your personal life, your background, everything. This could get messy. Amanda's thoughts raced. She had always been cautious about her public image, knowing how quickly a misstep could derail her career. And now, a well-intentioned act of kindness was being twisted into something potentially damaging. All right, she finally said, her voice steadier than she felt. Let's get the statement ready. I want to be transparent, but we need to make sure it doesn't fuel more speculation. Already on it, Melanie assured her. I'll draft something and send it over for your approval. We'll need to act fast. This story is gaining momentum by the minute. After hanging up, Amanda stared out the large windows of her office, the city's skyline a blur in the distance. The startup she had built from the ground up was her life's work, and now it was under threat because of one impulsive decision. The irony wasn't lost on her. She had been trying to do something good, and instead, she was facing a potential public relations disaster. Her thoughts were interrupted by a soft knock on the door. It was Jordan, her assistant, holding a tablet. Amanda, you need to see this, he said, his face pale. He handed her the tablet, which displayed a news website. The headline blared, Tech CEO involved in homeless scandal. Questions arise over family's safety. The article was harsh, filled with speculation and innuendo. It painted Amanda as a wealthy CEO with questionable judgment, someone who had recklessly involved herself in a situation she didn't fully understand. It was the kind of story that could quickly spiral out of control, damaging her reputation and, by extension, the company she had worked so hard to build. Amanda felt a mixture of anger and helplessness as she read the article. They're treating this like a scandal, not like someone just trying to help, she muttered. Jordan nodded sympathetically. The media loves a good scandal, especially when it involves someone in your position. But we can turn this around. Melanie's working on it, and the team's ready to support you. Amanda took a deep breath, trying to steady her nerves. I'm going to need all the help I can get. This isn't just about me, it's about the company too. Jordan gave her a reassuring smile. We've got your back. And remember, you did what you thought was right. Don't let them take that away from you. Amanda nodded, grateful for his words. But as she turned her attention back to the article, a new worry began to gnaw at her. If the media had already twisted the story this much, what would happen if they dug deeper? What if they uncovered more about Tom and Sarah's situation? Details even she didn't know. The thought of what could be unearthed made her stomach churn. Just then, her phone buzzed again. Another message from Melanie. The press is asking for a statement, and some outlets are requesting interviews. How do you want to handle this? Amanda typed back quickly, draft the statement, but no interviews for now. Let's see how this plays out. She set the phone down, her mind racing. She had always been a strategist, someone who could navigate the treacherous waters of the tech industry with ease. But this was different. This was personal, unpredictable, and potentially catastrophic. As she looked out at the fog that still lingered over the city, Amanda realized that this wasn't just about controlling a narrative. It was about protecting everything she had worked for. And to do that, she would have to be more careful than ever. She just hoped that, in the process, she wouldn't lose sight of why she had gotten involved in the first place. The sun hung low in the sky as Amanda sat alone in her office, the hum of the city below barely registering in her mind. The PR team had sent out the carefully crafted statement, a measured response that framed her actions as those of a concerned citizen simply trying to help a family in need. But the story wasn't going away. The media had latched onto it, and Amanda knew they wouldn't stop digging until they uncovered something that could turn a headline into a full-blown scandal. Amanda leaned back in her chair, rubbing her temples. She had done everything right, or so she thought. But now, Doubt gnawed at her, a constant whisper in the back of her mind. What if she had missed something? What if there was more to Tom and Sarah's story than she realized? Determined to find out, Amanda decided to dig deeper. She needed to know who Tom and Sarah really were, and why they had ended up on that bench outside her office. Maybe if she understood their situation better, she could find a way to resolve the chaos she had unintentionally set in motion. She reached for her phone and called Jordan, her assistant. "I need you to do some research for me," she said, her voice firm. "I want to know everything there is to know about Tom and Sarah Ellis. Background checks, any public records, anything you can find." Discreetly. Jordan hesitated on the other end of the line. "Are you sure, Amanda? This could be risky. If the press finds out you're investigating them, it might look like you're trying to cover something up." "I know," Amanda replied, tension threading through her voice. "But I have to know what I'm dealing with. We're already in deep. We can't afford any more surprises." After hanging up, Amanda tried to focus on her work, but her thoughts kept drifting back to Tom and Sarah. What were they hiding? The image of the little boy clutching his toy came to mind, and with it, a pang of guilt. Whatever had driven them to this point, they were still a family, and now they were caught in the middle of something they couldn't control. The day dragged on, each hour filled with phone calls, meetings, and the occasional email from Melanie updating her on the latest developments. But underneath it all, Amanda's thoughts kept circling back to the same question. What had she gotten herself into? It wasn't until late afternoon that Jordan knocked on her office door, a manila folder in his hand. He stepped inside, closing the door behind him, and handed the folder to Amanda. "This is everything I could find," he said, his voice low. "Some of it, well, you'll see." Amanda's heart raced as she opened the folder. Inside were pages of documents, background checks, arrest records, financial statements. She skimmed through them, her eyes narrowing as she began to piece together the story. Tom Ellis had once been a successful accountant, but things had taken a dark turn a few years ago. A failed business venture had left him deeply in debt, and he had struggled to recover ever since. Sarah's story was even more troubling. She had a history of substance abuse and had been in and out of rehab several times. There were also indications of a troubled relationship with her family, including a restraining order taken out by her parents a few years back. Amanda's stomach churned as she read through the details. This was more than just a family down on their luck. This was a family with a history of serious problems. And now, they were in her office, caught in the crosshairs of a media storm that could expose everything. She set the folder down, her mind reeling. The situation was far more complicated than she had anticipated, and she couldn't shake the feeling that there was still more she didn't know. She needed to talk to Tom and Sarah, to hear their side of the story directly. Amanda reached for her phone again and called Melanie. "I need to see them," she said without preamble. "Tom and Sarah, can you find out where they're being held?" Melanie sighed on the other end. "I'll see what I can do, but it won't be easy. CPS is handling their case now, and they're not going to make this simple, but I'll make some calls." "Thanks, Melanie," Amanda replied, trying to keep the frustration out of her voice. I need to understand what's really going on." After hanging up, Amanda stared at the folder on her desk. The more she learned, the deeper she got pulled into this mess. But now, it wasn't just about protecting her company or her reputation. There was a family at the center of this, a family that, for all their flaws, needed help. As the evening wore on, Amanda remained in her office, the weight of the situation pressing down on her. She thought back to that moment when she first saw Tom, Sarah, and their son on the bench. She had acted on instinct, on compassion, without knowing the full story. And now, she was faced with the consequences of that decision. But Amanda wasn't one to back down from a challenge. She had built her company from nothing, navigating countless obstacles along the way. This was just another challenge, albeit a deeply personal one. She would find out the truth, and she would do everything in her power to fix the situation. But as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across her office, Amanda couldn't shake the feeling that the more she uncovered, the more dangerous the situation would become. Night had fully fallen over San Francisco, the city's lights twinkling like a sea of stars against the inky darkness. Amanda sat in her office, the glow of her computer screen casting a pale light over her determined expression. The weight of the documents she had uncovered about Tom and Sarah pressed heavily on her mind. Their pasts were fraught with difficulties, mistakes, and decisions that had led them to the brink of despair. And now, they were at the center of a storm that could destroy them and her. As the hours ticked by, Amanda knew she had to make a choice. She could walk away, let the authorities handle the situation, and focus on salvaging her reputation and company. But the thought of abandoning the family gnawed at her. She couldn't shake the image of that little boy, caught in a web of circumstances beyond his control, terrified and confused. She had started this, and now she had a responsibility to see it through. Amanda's phone buzzed, pulling her from her thoughts. It was Melanie, her voice cautious yet urgent. I managed to pull a few strings. Tom and Sarah are being held at a temporary shelter, under CPS supervision. You won't be able to meet them without raising suspicions, but I can arrange a call. Amanda exhaled slowly, feeling a knot of tension in her chest. Set it up. I need to talk to them, find out what their plan is, if they even have one. Melanie hesitated for a moment. Are you sure about this? You're already in deep, and if this goes wrong, it could get even worse. I'm sure, Amanda replied, the resolve in her voice leaving no room for doubt. I need to know the truth, Melanie. I can't just leave them to deal with this alone. After hanging up, Amanda leaned back in her chair, closing her eyes as she tried to steady her nerves. She had always prided herself on being a problem solver, someone who could think her way out of any situation. But this was different. This wasn't just about business. This was about people's lives. A few minutes later, her phone rang again. It was Melanie. I've got them on the line. I'll patch you through. Amanda's heart pounded in her chest as the call connected, and she heard Tom's voice on the other end, strained and tired. Amanda, is that you? Yes, it's me, Amanda replied, trying to keep her voice calm. How are you holding up? There was a pause before Tom spoke again, his voice laced with uncertainty. We're managing. It's not easy, but they're treating us all right. Our son. He's scared, but we're trying to keep it together for him. Amanda felt a pang of guilt. She had been the one to involve them in this mess, and now they were paying the price. I'm so sorry this has happened. I wanted to help, but I never imagined it would turn out like this. It's not your fault, Sarah's voice broke in, soft but resolute. We've been running from our problems for so long. It was bound to catch up to us eventually, but you were kind to us when we needed it most. We don't blame you. Amanda swallowed hard, the weight of their words sinking in. I've been looking into your situation, she said carefully. I know about your past, what you've been through, but I need to understand. Why didn't you tell me more? Why didn't you ask for help sooner? There was a long silence on the other end of the line. When Tom finally spoke, his voice was thick with emotion. We didn't want to drag anyone else into our mess. We've made mistakes, big ones, and we didn't want to burden anyone else with them. We thought we could handle it, but we were wrong. Amanda felt a surge of frustration and compassion all at once. You're not a burden, she said firmly. You're a family in need of help, and I want to help you. But I need to know, do you have a plan? Is there anything you're not telling me? We were trying to start over, Sarah said quietly, but it's hard when you're constantly looking over your shoulder. We just wanted a fresh start, a place where our son could grow up safe. But now, I don't know what we're going to do. Amanda's mind raced. She could hear the desperation in their voices, the fear of the unknown that loomed over them. They needed a way out, a chance to break free from their past. And she realized, with a sinking feeling, that she was their best hope. I have a friend, Amanda began slowly, thinking through the options. A lawyer who specializes in family law. He might be able to help you sort through this, figure out a way to get CPS off your back and start fresh. But it's going to take time, and you'll need to be honest with him about everything. Tom's breath caught. Do you really think that could work? After everything that's happened? It's a risk, Amanda admitted, but it's better than running. You need to face this head-on if you want a real chance at a new life. Sarah's voice was shaky but determined. We'll do whatever it takes. We just want our son to have a chance, something better than we've had. Amanda nodded, even though they couldn't see her. I'll make the call, but you need to be ready. This won't be easy, and it might get worse before it gets better. We're ready, Tom said, his voice steadier now. Thank you, Amanda. You've already done so much for us. As the call ended, Amanda sat in silence, the weight of her decisions settling in. She had committed herself to helping this family, despite the risks, despite the potential fallout. But deep down, she knew she couldn't turn her back on them. Not now. She picked up her phone and dialed the number of her lawyer friend, feeling a sense of urgency driving her forward. This was a gamble, one that could either save them or pull them all down even further. But Amanda was willing to take that risk. As the phone rang, Amanda steeled herself for what was to come. She had made her choice, and now there was no turning back. Enjoying the video? Subscribe to our channel to receive more interesting content. Click the subscribe button and stay updated with the latest news. The next few days passed in a whirlwind of tension and uncertainty. Amanda's lawyer friend, Greg Lawson, had agreed to take on the case, but even he had warned her of the challenges ahead. The system was complex, and with CPS involved, the situation was far from straightforward. There were protocols, investigations, and endless paperwork that needed to be navigated carefully. Amanda sat in her office, her gaze fixed on the bustling city outside, but her thoughts were elsewhere. Greg had managed to set up a meeting with CPS to discuss Tom and Sarah's case. It was a small victory, but it was just the beginning. She knew they were up against a system that wasn't always kind or just, especially to families like the Elises, who were already teetering on the edge. Her phone rang, jolting her from her thoughts. It was Greg. Amanda, I've spoken to CPS, he began, his tone measured. They're willing to hear us out, but they're not making any promises. They've already flagged this case as high risk, given Tom and Sarah's history. Amanda sighed, rubbing her temples. What does that mean for them? Are we in any position to negotiate? It means they're under a microscope, Greg explained. CPS is concerned about the boy's safety, and they're not convinced that Tom and Sarah can provide a stable environment for him. But they've agreed to meet tomorrow, and we need to be prepared. Amanda felt a wave of frustration. We're not going to let them take their son away, are we? Greg hesitated, choosing his words carefully. We'll do everything we can to keep the family together, but Amanda, you need to understand. If CPS thinks the child is at risk, they have the authority to remove him from the home. We need to present a solid case that Tom and Sarah are capable of turning things around, and that's not going to be easy given their past. Amanda's chest tightened at the thought. She had gotten to know this family, seen their struggles and their hope for a better future. The idea of their son being taken from them was unbearable. What can I do to help? She asked, her voice firm. You've already done a lot, Greg replied, but I'll need you there at the meeting tomorrow. Your support could make a difference. Show that they have someone in their corner who believes in them. I'll be there, Amanda promised. Just tell me what I need to do. As she hung up, Amanda felt the weight of the situation pressing down on her. She had built a successful company by facing challenges head-on, but this was different. This wasn't just about business. This was about a family's future, and the stakes were higher than ever. The next morning, Amanda arrived at the CPS office, her heart pounding in her chest. She had dressed carefully, choosing an outfit that conveyed both professionalism and approachability, qualities she hoped would help sway the CPS workers. Greg was already there, waiting for her in the lobby, his expression serious. Ready? He asked as she approached. Amanda nodded, trying to steady her nerves. As ready as I'll ever be. Greg led her through a maze of hallways to a small, nondescript conference room where the meeting would take place. Inside, Tom and Sarah sat side by side, their faces drawn with anxiety. Their son was with a social worker in another room, away from the tense negotiations about his future. As Amanda took a seat next to them, she offered a reassuring smile. We're going to do everything we can, she whispered, and they nodded, though their fear was palpable. The door opened, and 2 CPS workers entered, followed by the social worker who had been assigned to the case. They took their seats across the table, their expressions professionally neutral. The lead worker, a stern-looking woman named Ms. Harris, began the meeting. Mr. and Mrs. Ellis, we've reviewed your case, and we have serious concerns about the welfare of your child, Ms. Harris said, her tone devoid of emotion. Your history, combined with the current instability of your situation, raises significant red flags. We need to discuss your ability to provide a safe and stable environment for your son. Tom and Sarah exchanged a nervous glance, and Amanda felt a surge of protectiveness. Miss Harris, if I may, she began, leaning forward slightly. I've gotten to know Tom and Sarah, and I believe they're committed to turning things around. They've had setbacks, but they're willing to work hard to create a better life for their son. They just need a chance. Ms. Harris turned her gaze to Amanda, her eyes narrowing slightly. Ms. Green, we appreciate your support, but this isn't just about hard work. It's about ensuring that the child's safety is not compromised. We need to see concrete evidence that Tom and Sarah can provide a stable environment. Greg stepped in smoothly. We understand your concerns, Ms. Harris. That's why we're proposing a structured plan. A combination of supervised visitation, parenting classes, and regular check-ins with a CPS officer. Tom and Sarah are fully committed to following this plan to demonstrate their ability to care for their son. Ms. Harris considered this for a moment, her expression unreadable. We'll need to see a detailed plan, including timelines and benchmarks. And even then, there's no guarantee that the child won't be removed from the home if we determine it's in his best interest. Amanda's heart sank. They were fighting an uphill battle, and it was clear that CPS wasn't going to make it easy. But she couldn't give up. I'm willing to support them financially too, she added. They won't be doing this alone. I'll ensure they have the resources they need to succeed. Ms. Harris raised an eyebrow at that, but she didn't dismiss the offer outright. Financial support is helpful, but it doesn't replace the need for a safe and nurturing environment. We'll take your proposal under consideration, but I can't make any promises. The meeting continued for another hour, with Greg outlining the specifics of their plan and Ms. Harris questioning every detail. By the time it ended, Amanda felt emotionally drained, but she knew they had done everything they could. Now, it was up to CPS to decide the family's fate. As they left the conference room, Tom and Sarah looked to Amanda with a mix of hope and fear. Do you think it will work? Sarah asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Amanda wished she could offer more certainty. I don't know, she admitted, but we've given them a plan, and we'll keep fighting, no matter what. Tom nodded, his expression resolute. We're not giving up. We'll do whatever it takes. As they exited the building, Amanda couldn't help but feel the weight of the world on her shoulders. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. The system had struck back, challenging everything they were trying to achieve. But Amanda was determined to see it through. They would face whatever came next, together. Amanda's heart felt heavy as she left the CPS office, the uncertainty of the meeting lingering like a dark cloud. The tension between the Elises and the system designed to protect their son was palpable, and Amanda couldn't shake the feeling that they were standing on the edge of a precipice. The next few days would be critical. The next morning, Amanda was back in her office, but she could hardly focus on work. Emails piled up, but they were nothing compared to the anxious knot in her stomach. Every time her phone buzzed, her heart skipped a beat, expecting bad news from Greg or an update from CPS. Just as she was about to dive into another round of paperwork, her phone rang. It was Greg, and from the tone in his voice, Amanda knew something was wrong. Amanda, Greg began, his voice tense. We've hit a snag. I've been digging into Tom's past as part of building a solid case, and I found something troubling. There's someone from Tom's old life, a man named Vince Carpenter. He's a known criminal, involved in some pretty shady activities, and it seems like he's been looking for Tom. Amanda's blood ran cold. Looking for him? Why? It's hard to say for sure, but from what I've gathered, Tom might have crossed Vince in a business deal gone wrong a few years back. Vince has a reputation for not letting things go. If he's found out where Tom is, this could get dangerous, especially with everything else going on. Amanda's mind raced. Does Tom know about this? Does he know Vince is looking for him? I don't think so, Greg replied. If he does, he hasn't mentioned it. But we can't take any chances. Vince is the kind of guy who will use any leverage he can get, and that includes going after Tom's family. Amanda felt a chill run down her spine. This was the last thing they needed. With CPS breathing down their necks, the added threat of someone like Vince Carpenter could tip the balance in the worst possible way. What do we do? How do we protect them? We need to inform Tom and Sarah, Make sure they're aware of the situation, Greg said. And we need to put some security measures in place. Maybe even consider relocating them temporarily, just until we figure out how serious this threat is. Amanda's thoughts were spinning. The idea of moving them again, uprooting their lives when they were already so fragile, seemed almost cruel. But the alternative, leaving them vulnerable, was unthinkable. I'll talk to them, she said, her voice steady despite the fear gnawing at her. We'll do whatever it takes to keep them safe. After hanging up, Amanda sat back in her chair, her mind racing. This was getting out of control. She had wanted to help this family, to give them a chance at a better life. But now it seemed like every step forward was met with an even greater obstacle. Later that day, Amanda met Tom and Sarah at a small, quiet cafe on the outskirts of the city. It was a neutral place, away from the prying eyes of the media or anyone who might be looking for them. As they sat down, Amanda could see the weariness etched into their faces. They had been through so much already, and now she had to break this news to them. There's something you need to know, Amanda began, choosing her words carefully. Greg found out that someone from your past, a man named Vince Carpenter, has been looking for you, Tom. We don't know why, but it doesn't look good. Tom's face paled, and his hands trembled slightly as he gripped his coffee cup. Vince, I thought I'd left that all behind. I haven't heard from him in years. Who is he? Sarah asked, her voice a mix of fear and confusion. What does he want? Tom hesitated, glancing at Amanda before turning to Sarah. Vince was involved in some pretty shady deals back when I was struggling to get back on my feet. I made some bad decisions, got involved with the wrong people. Vince and I had a falling out when I backed out of a deal. I didn't think he'd come after me, but if he knows where we are. Amanda leaned forward, her voice gentle but firm. We need to take this seriously, Tom. Greg is suggesting we consider relocating you, just until we can assess how dangerous Vince might be. Sarah's eyes widened in alarm. Relocate? But we're just starting to get settled. And with CPS watching us, how would that even work? I know it's not ideal, Amanda said, but your safety comes first. If Vince is a threat, we need to protect you and your son. We can figure out the logistics, but you need to be prepared for the possibility. Tom looked down, his face tight with anxiety. I never wanted any of this to touch our son. We've been running for so long. I thought maybe we could finally stop. But now, we'll face this together, Amanda said firmly. You're not alone in this. We'll find a way to deal with Vince, but we have to be smart about it. The rest of the conversation was tense, with Tom and Sarah processing the gravity of the situation. Amanda did her best to reassure them, but she knew this was only the beginning. Vince Carpenter was an unknown variable, a threat that could undermine everything they were fighting for. As she left the cafe, Amanda's mind was already racing with plans. She needed to contact Greg, arrange for security, and figure out a way to keep CPS in the dark about the relocation. It was a delicate balance, protecting the family without drawing more attention to them. But as Amanda walked through the quiet streets, she couldn't shake the feeling that the situation was spiraling out of control. The more she tried to help, the more complicated things became. And now, with Vince Carpenter in the mix, the stakes were higher than ever. Amanda knew one thing for sure. She had to stay ahead of this, no matter what, because if she didn't, everything they had worked for could come crashing down. And she wouldn't let that happen. The news of Vince Carpenter's involvement cast a dark shadow over the already tense situation. Amanda spent the next few days in a flurry of activity, coordinating with Greg, setting up security measures, and trying to keep the media at bay. Every decision felt like a gamble, with the stakes growing higher by the hour. By the time the weekend arrived, Amanda was running on little sleep and sheer determination. She had arranged for Tom, Sarah, and their son to move to a safe house in a quiet suburb outside of San Francisco. Greg had pulled some strings to ensure that CPS was kept in the dark about the relocation, framing it as a necessary precaution due to external threats. It was a risky move, but they had little choice. The safe house was a modest, unassuming place, far removed from the chaos of the city. It was the kind of neighborhood where no one asked too many questions, where families kept to themselves. Amanda arrived early on a rainy Saturday morning to check on the arrangements and make sure everything was ready. As she stood in the small living room, Listening to the steady patter of rain against the windows, she couldn't help but feel a sense of dread. Everything was in place, but it felt like they were merely buying time. Vince Carpenter was a wild card, and there was no telling how far he would go to find Tom. A knock at the door pulled Amanda from her thoughts. She opened it to find Tom, Sarah, and their son standing on the porch, looking worn and weary. Tom's face was etched with fatigue, and Sarah clutched their son's hand tightly, her eyes filled with uncertainty. "Come in," Amanda said, stepping aside to let them in. "Everything's ready. You'll be safe here." Tom gave her a grateful nod as they entered the house. "Thank you, Amanda. We know this isn't easy, but we didn't know where else to turn." Amanda offered a reassuring smile, though it felt forced. "We're doing what we have to do to keep you safe. That's what matters." As they settled in, Amanda walked them through the security measures Greg had arranged. There were cameras at the front and back of the house, a direct line to a private security firm, and an emergency plan in case they needed to leave quickly. It wasn't foolproof, but it was the best they could do under the circumstances. "Just remember," Amanda said, her tone serious, "if anything feels off, if you even suspect that Vince is close, don't hesitate to use the emergency plan. Your safety is the priority." Tom nodded, his expression grim. "We understand. We'll be careful." Their son, who had been quiet throughout the conversation, tugged at Sarah's sleeve. "Mom, will we have to move again?" Sarah knelt down, brushing a strand of hair from his face. "I don't know, sweetheart, but we're going to be okay. We'll do whatever it takes to stay together." Amanda watched the interaction, a pang of guilt tugging at her heart. This was not the life they deserved, constantly on the run, living in fear. But what choice did they have? She had to believe that this was temporary, that they could find a way out of this nightmare. After ensuring that they were settled, Amanda stepped outside to make a call to Greg. The rain had lightened to a drizzle, and the air was cool and damp. She paced the front yard as the phone rang, her nerves frayed from the constant tension. "Greg," she said when he picked up, "they're here, and everything seems to be in order. But we need to talk about what happens next. We can't keep them here indefinitely." Greg's voice was calm but firm. "I've been thinking about that. We need to find a way to neutralize Vince, or at least keep him from finding them. I've reached out to some contacts who might be able to help, but it's going to take time." Amanda clenched her jaw, frustrated by the lack of immediate solutions. "Time is something we don't have. We need to find a way to end this, Greg. They can't keep running." "I know," Greg replied, "but we have to be smart about this. If we push too hard, we could provoke Vince, and that would make things even more dangerous. Right now, we need to keep a low profile and buy ourselves some breathing room." Amanda sighed, knowing he was right. "Okay, keep me updated on anything you find out, and let me know if there's anything else I can do." After hanging up, Amanda stood outside for a moment, letting the rain mist her face. She felt the weight of the situation pressing down on her, a suffocating sense of responsibility that seemed impossible to escape. She had become entangled in this family's life, and now their fate was tied to hers. As she re-entered the house, she found Tom and Sarah sitting together on the couch, their son playing quietly on the floor. They looked up as she approached, their expressions a mix of gratitude and fear. "We'll stay here for now," Tom said, his voice steady despite the uncertainty. "But what happens after this? We can't keep living like this, always looking over our shoulders." Amanda sat down across from them, searching for the right words. "Greg and I are working on finding a way to deal with Vince. But in the meantime, you need to focus on keeping your family safe. We'll figure out the rest as we go." Sarah nodded, though the worry in her eyes remained. "And what about CPS? They're going to find out eventually that we've moved. What happens then?" Amanda had been dreading that question. "We'll cross that bridge when we get to it. For now, we need to keep them at bay. If they see that you're taking steps to protect your son, that you're working to create a stable environment, it could work in your favor." Tom sighed, running a hand through his hair. "This is all so complicated. But we trust you, Amanda. You've done more for us than we could have ever asked." "I'm not giving up on you," Amanda said, her voice firm. "We'll get through this, one way or another." As the day wore on, Amanda stayed with the family, helping them get settled and offering what comfort she could. But deep down, She knew this was only a temporary solution. The real challenge lay ahead, and it was a challenge that would test everything they had: courage, resilience, and faith in each other. As she finally left the safe house, driving back to the city in the fading light of evening, Amanda couldn't shake the feeling that they were running out of time. Vince Carpenter was out there, a looming threat that could destroy everything if they weren't careful. And with each passing day, the risk of losing everything grew greater. Amanda drove through the darkening streets of San Francisco, the city's lights flickering through the drizzle like distant stars. Her mind was a whirlwind of thoughts, each one more troubling than the last. She couldn't shake the feeling that the situation was slipping further out of control with every passing hour. The relocation to the safe house had provided temporary respite, but Amanda knew it was only a matter of time before Vince Carpenter caught up to them. And then, there was the looming threat of CPS discovering their move, a discovery that could trigger an even bigger crisis. By the time Amanda reached her apartment, the weight of the day had settled heavily on her shoulders. She stepped out of the car and glanced up at the building, the familiar sight offering little comfort. The elegant lobby, the sleek elevator, the quiet, pristine hallways. It all felt strangely disconnected from the turmoil she was wrapped up in. As the elevator doors slid shut, enclosing her in the small, polished space, Amanda leaned against the wall, closing her eyes for a brief moment. She needed a plan, something more concrete than just reacting to each new threat as it appeared. Her phone buzzed in her hand as the elevator ascended, pulling her back to the present. She glanced at the screen. A message from Greg. "We need to talk. Call me when you get home." Amanda's stomach tightened. The brief message was enough to unsettle her, the urgency clear. As soon as she stepped into her apartment, she dialed Greg's number. He answered on the first ring. "Amanda, I'm glad you called. We've got a problem." "What's happened?" Amanda asked, her pulse quickening. "Vince has been spotted in San Francisco," Greg said, his voice laced with tension. "One of my contacts saw him near the area where Tom and Sarah used to stay. He's asking questions, looking for them. It's only a matter of time before he narrows it down." Amanda felt a cold wave of fear wash over her. "Does he know about the safe house?" "Not yet," Greg replied, "but we can't take any chances. If he's determined to find them, he'll keep digging until he does. And we both know what could happen if he does." Amanda's mind raced. They were running out of options. What do we do? We can't move them again, not without raising red flags with CPS. "I've been thinking about that," Greg said, his tone measured. "We need to find a way to neutralize Vince before he gets any closer. If we can't get him to back off, then we'll have to involve the authorities. But that could expose everything. I've got a private investigator looking into Vince's recent activities, trying to find some leverage we can use against him." Amanda was silent for a moment, the enormity of the situation weighing on her. Vince Carpenter wasn't just a threat to Tom and Sarah. He was a threat to everything she tried to do to help them. "We can't let him get to them," she said finally, her voice firm. "Whatever it takes, we have to stop him." "I'll keep you updated," Greg said. "But be prepared for anything, Amanda. This could get ugly." After hanging up, Amanda sat down heavily on the couch, her thoughts spinning. Vince's presence in the city was a ticking time bomb, one that could go off at any moment. She felt a surge of frustration and helplessness. She had been trying so hard to protect this family, but now it seemed like the walls were closing in on all sides. Her thoughts were interrupted by another call, this time from Melanie. Amanda hesitated before answering, knowing that whatever news Melanie had, it probably wasn't good. "Amanda, I hate to bother you with this," Melanie began, her voice tinged with concern, "but I just got word that a reporter has been sniffing around the safe house. Apparently, they got a tip that you've been involved in relocating a family connected to some kind of scandal. They're digging, Amanda, and it's only a matter of time before they connect the dots." Amanda felt a sinking feeling in her chest. "Do we know who tipped them off?" "Not yet, but I'm working on it," Melanie replied. "We need to get ahead of this. If the press finds out about the safe house, or about Vince, it could blow everything wide open. We'd be looking at a media frenzy, and CPS would almost certainly get involved." Amanda's mind raced. The press was like a pack of wolves. Once they caught the scent of a story, They wouldn't stop until they'd torn it apart. What do we do? Can we stop them? I'll do what I can to throw them off the trail, Melanie said. But you need to be prepared for the worst. If they break this story, we'll need to go into damage control mode immediately. And we need to figure out how to handle CPS if they start asking questions. Amanda rubbed her temples, trying to stave off the headache building behind her eyes. All right, keep me updated on anything you find out. We need to stay one step ahead of this. After ending the call, Amanda felt a surge of anger and frustration. It seemed like every time she made progress, something else popped up to knock her back down. Vince Carpenter, the media, CPS. It was all closing in on her, on Tom and Sarah, and on their son. She needed a plan, something decisive that would end this once and for all. But as she sat there in her dark apartment, the rain tapping against the windows, Amanda struggled to see a way out. Every move they made seemed to lead to more danger, more complications. Then, an idea began to form in the back of her mind. It was risky, possibly reckless, but it might just be the only way to end this nightmare. She picked up her phone again and dialed Greg's number. "Greg," she said when he answered, "I've been thinking, what if we turned the tables on Vince?" "What do you mean?" Greg asked, his tone cautious. "We know Vince is looking for Tom, right?" Amanda continued, her mind working quickly now. "What if we let him think he's found him? We could set a trap, lure Vince in, and then deal with him. Legally, of course." Greg was silent for a moment, processing the idea. "That's dangerous, Amanda. If we're not careful, it could backfire. Vince is dangerous, and if he realizes we're setting him up, he could retaliate in ways we can't control." "I know it's risky," Amanda said, her voice steady. "But sitting around waiting for him to make the first move isn't an option anymore. We need to take control of this situation before it's too late." Greg sighed on the other end of the line. "If we're going to do this, we need to plan it out carefully. We'll need to involve the authorities, but we'll have to do it in a way that doesn't expose Tom and Sarah. And we'll need to be absolutely sure that Vince takes the bait." Amanda nodded, determination hardening in her chest. "Let's do it. Start putting the plan together. We'll end this, Greg, one way or another." As she hung up the phone, Amanda felt a strange sense of clarity. The fear, the uncertainty, the chaos, all of it seemed to recede, replaced by a steely resolve. Vince Carpenter had pushed them into a corner, but now they were pushing back. It was a dangerous game they were playing, but Amanda was no stranger to risk. She had built her career by taking bold steps, by facing down challenges that would have crushed others. This was no different, except that it was. Because this time, it wasn't just about business or reputation. It was about a family's future, about protecting the innocent, about standing up against someone who thought they could take whatever they wanted without consequence. As the rain continued to fall outside, Amanda felt the weight of the coming days settle over her. It wouldn't be easy, and it wouldn't be without risk, but she was ready to fight. For Tom, for Sarah, for their son, and for the chance to finally put an end to the nightmare that had engulfed them all. Amanda stood by the window of her apartment, staring out at the city lights as night fell over San Francisco. The weight of the decision she had made with Greg weighed heavily on her, but there was no turning back now. The plan was already in motion, and if everything went right, it would all be over soon. Vince Carpenter, the looming threat that had haunted them for weeks, was about to be lured into a carefully crafted trap. Amanda's nerves were on edge, knowing that any misstep could lead to disaster. But this was the only option left. Vince had forced their hand, and now they had to act. Amanda's phone buzzed on the kitchen counter, jolting her from her thoughts. It was Greg, as expected. She answered quickly, her heart racing. "It's time," Greg said, his voice steady but tense. "Vince took the bait. He's heading to the location we set up." Amanda took a deep breath, steeling herself for what was to come. "Are the police in position?" "They're ready," Greg confirmed. "We've got undercover officers watching from multiple angles. Once Vince makes his move, they'll close in." "Good," Amanda replied, though her nerves were still jangling. "And Tom and Sarah? They're safe?" "They're fine," Greg assured her. "They're still at the safe house, completely unaware of what's happening tonight. We didn't want to risk them panicking or trying to interfere." Amanda nodded, feeling a wave of relief. Keeping Tom and Sarah out of the loop had been a difficult decision, but it was necessary. If they knew Vince was about to be confronted, there was no telling how they might react. This had to be handled with precision and care. "I'll be at the location in 15 minutes, Amanda said. "I want to be there when it happens." Greg hesitated for a moment. "Are you sure about that, Amanda? This could get dangerous. Vince isn't going to go down quietly." "I'm sure," Amanda replied, her voice firm. "I need to see this through. I won't get in the way, but I need to be there." Greg sighed but didn't argue. "All right, just be careful." Amanda grabbed her coat and hurried out the door, her mind racing as she made her way to the car. The drive to the rendezvous point felt like it took forever, the city streets strangely quiet for a Friday night. She kept checking the clock on the dashboard, her hands gripping the steering wheel tightly. This was it, the moment everything had been leading to. She had to believe that they had prepared enough, that the police were ready, and that Vince wouldn't slip through their fingers. As she pulled into the parking lot of the nondescript warehouse where the trap had been set, Amanda's pulse quickened. She spotted Greg's car parked at the far end, partially concealed by a row of abandoned vehicles. She pulled in next to him, cutting the engine and taking a deep breath before stepping out into the cool night air. Greg was waiting for her, his expression tense but focused. "He's inside," Greg said quietly as Amanda approached. "The police are in position. We just have to wait for the signal." Amanda nodded, her eyes scanning the darkened windows of the warehouse. The plan had been to lure Vince to the location with a fabricated lead, something that would make him believe he had finally tracked down Tom. Greg had arranged for one of his contacts, someone with ties to Vince's criminal network, to feed him just enough information to draw him in. Now, all they had to do was wait for Vince to take the bait. "How long do you think it'll be?" Amanda asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Shouldn't be long," Greg replied. "He'll want to check the place out before making his move. Once he's inside and feels secure, the police will close in." Amanda nodded again, though her nerves were frayed. She glanced around, spotting the shadowy figures of police officers stationed at key points around the warehouse. Everything was in place. They just needed Vince to make one wrong move. Minutes felt like hours as they waited in tense silence. Amanda's heart pounded in her chest, her mind racing with what-ifs. What if Vince somehow got away? What if the police couldn't control the situation? What if someone got hurt? The uncertainty gnawed at her, but she forced herself to stay calm. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Greg's phone buzzed. He answered quickly, his face illuminated by the glow of the screen. "Is he in?" Amanda whispered, her pulse quickening. Greg nodded as he listened to the officer on the other end of the line. "They've confirmed it. Vince is inside the building. He's not alone. There's at least one other person with him, but it doesn't look like he's armed. The police are moving in now." Amanda felt a rush of adrenaline as Greg hung up the phone. This was it. The police were about to make their move, and if everything went according to plan, Vince Carpenter would finally be out of their lives. They stood in silence, waiting for the sound of sirens or shouting, but the night remained eerily quiet. Amanda's nerves were stretched to the breaking point as the seconds ticked by. She could feel the tension in the air, the sense that something was about to snap. Then, suddenly, the calm was shattered by the sound of movement, shouting, the clatter of footsteps, and the unmistakable crackle of police radios. Greg and Amanda exchanged a tense glance, but neither of them moved from their spot. They couldn't interfere now. They had to let the police do their job. Amanda strained to listen, trying to make out what was happening inside the warehouse. The sounds of struggle echoed faintly through the night, followed by the sharp, commanding voices of the officers. It was clear that Vince wasn't going down without a fight, but the police had the upper hand. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the warehouse doors were flung open, and two officers emerged, dragging a handcuffed Vince Carpenter between them. His face was twisted in anger, his eyes wild as he struggled against their grip. Amanda's breath caught in her throat as she watched him, the man who had haunted Tom and Sarah's lives for so long. Vince looked rougher than she had imagined. His face weathered and scarred, his clothes rumpled and dirty. But what struck Amanda most was the rage in his eyes, the sheer fury that radiated off him as he was forced to his knees in the parking lot. One of the officers approached Greg and Amanda, his face calm but serious. "It's done," he said simply. "Vince Carpenter is in custody. We'll be processing him tonight. He won't be a threat to anyone anymore." Amanda let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Relief flooded through her, though it was tinged with exhaustion and disbelief. It was over. Vince was finally out of their lives. "Thank you," Amanda said, her voice soft but sincere. She knew the police had done their job, but she couldn't help feeling grateful for their careful handling of the situation. Greg placed a hand on her shoulder, offering her a small, tired smile. "You did it, Amanda. You saw this through." Amanda nodded, though she still felt the weight of everything that had happened pressing down on her. "We all did," she replied. "Now, maybe Tom and Sarah can finally have some peace." As they watched Vince being loaded into the police car, Amanda felt a strange mix of emotions. Relief, yes, but also a lingering sadness for everything that had been lost along the way. Vince's arrest marked the end of one chapter, but the fight wasn't over yet. There was still CPS to deal with, still the media storm to navigate. But for the first time in weeks, Amanda felt a glimmer of hope that maybe, just maybe, they could get through this. She glanced over at Greg, who was watching the scene with the same quiet intensity she felt. "What now?" she asked, her voice steady but tired. "Now," Greg replied, "we regroup, we make sure Tom and Sarah are safe, and we deal with CPS. One step at a time." Amanda nodded, feeling a sense of resolve settle over her. One step at a time. They had made it this far, and she wasn't about to back down now. There was still work to be done, still challenges to face. But for the first time, Amanda believed they might actually come out the other side. As the police car pulled away, carrying Vince into the night, Amanda stood in the quiet parking lot, the cool air brushing against her skin. The shadows that had loomed over them for so long were finally beginning to lift, and though the road ahead was still uncertain, Amanda felt ready to face it. They had survived the storm. Now, it was time to rebuild. We hope you were moved and inspired by our story. We want to hear your opinion. Leave a comment below, share your impressions, and your own stories of resilience and hope. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss our next emotional videos. Join us on this journey and follow more incredible stories. See you next time.